Good morning. Happy Monday morning. I hope that you are all doing well. We're moving on to talking about ecological relationships. So I would like to go over some of the slides that I shared with you this morning. We'll skip this one because I don't think we need it really right now. The two relationships that I think you're going to be the most familiar with are the obvious ones, predator-prey. So there's the things that eat and there's the things that get eaten in the world. So in this example, you have your polar bear and you have a cute little seal, and in this image right over here to the top right-hand corner, you have a very graphic image of a dead little seal. So I'm not gonna spend too much time looking at that, but the first relationship that you learn about as far as ecology is eat or be eaten. Now, we don't necessarily fall into that because we kind of removed ourselves. So don't think about us in terms of predator or prey, because we kind of exist in this other world outside of the normal ecology. But most organisms can be classified either into predator, prey, but that's just one of the types of relationships that organisms can have. This video, I'm not going to play it, but I want you to take a look at it. This is the basics of symbiosis. So symbiosis, think about our root word. If you can imagine that root word wall that we have up in front of the classroom by the whiteboard or the smartboard, you have different parts of the words. You have sim, and sim, S-Y-M, that's together. And bio is life. So sim, together, bio, life. Symbiosis is organisms living together. Symbiosis is describing very, very close relationships between organisms. And there's three main types of relationships we're going to look at. These are outside of predator-prey relationships. As you can see here, your hint of what they are: mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. This next slide is going to talk a little bit more about symbiosis, symbiotic relationships, before we move on to the particulars. So living things live together in relationships called symbiosis. Here you have clownfish and anemone. This might be familiar to you if you ever watched Finding Nemo. Remember Merlin, the clownfish, and Nemo, they live in this anemone, and the anemone is protecting them from predators. And who knows what are Marlin and Nemo doing for these anemone? You can kind of do your own research and find out what type of relationship these clownfish and anemone have. But living together, they have a symbiotic relationship, whether it's parasitism, mutualism, or commensalism, we'll learn about in a second. Now, in these symbiotic relationships, at least one of the organisms strongly depends on the other. It could be depending on it for food, for nutrients, for protection, for any number of things, but at least one of these organisms depends on the other. So the first look at these, you have mutualism. So our example here is a bee and a flower. Now, if you just look at this image, then it's fairly familiar. You've seen this before. You see bees outside roaming around flowers, especially the sweet smelling ones. What are they doing? Well, they're getting that nectar, they're getting that sweet stuff that's there in the center of the flower right here, and they're going to use it to make honey. So the bee is using the flower for its benefit. The bee is getting nutrients from the flower to make honey. But the flower also benefits, because when the bee comes and feeds on the nectar of the flower, it's going to fly to another flower. And as you can see on the little legs right here where my arrow is, they're picking up pollen. These little hairs and ridges on the legs of the bees pick up pollen from the center of these flowers when they're getting the nectar. And then this bee will fly to another flower. And when it flies to another flower, it's going to drop off pollen from this flower. So that's the act of pollination. We all know bees are great pollinators. We depend on them for so much of the pollination that happens to our crops that become both food or clothing or whatever. Any pollination that bees are doing is probably helpful to us as humans. So because the bee is benefiting, it's getting nectar. And because the flower is benefiting, it's being pollinated, it's reproducing because of this bee. This is mutualism. Mutual, you can think like a mutual agreement. You both agree to something, right? In a mutual agreement. Mutual meaning it goes both ways, it's equal. And in mutualism, this is a relationship where both species benefit. So these organisms are dependent on each other to prosper. They need each other to be able to, live their lives, to be able to carry out their normal processes. They need each other. Flowers need bees just as much as bees need flowers. Bees without flowers would probably perish. Flowers without bees would not pollinate as well, would probably not have as many offspring, that is, they wouldn't make as many new flowers. So both of these organisms would suffer without the other. And then you have commensalism. So here you have this shark, and you have these little fish that are clinging onto it. They're just kind of sucking onto the surface. So the shark, it's not, nothing bad is happening to it, but nothing good either. These fish aren't cleaning it. They're just kind of swimming around, hanging out with this shark. So the shark is not benefiting. It's also not being harmed. But these fish, if you look at them, they're being protected by this shark. Now, the shark didn't necessarily agree to this, but these fish swim very close to the shark. And when the shark eats and scraps fall out, well, these fish catch onto it. They benefit by feeding off of the scraps of the shark whenever the shark feeds, and they're also protected. So who's benefiting here? Well, these little fish. They're benefiting, so you can think of that positive for these little fish. And the shark, it's not benefiting, but it's also not being harmed. So if you're thinking in terms of positive, negative, neutral, positive for the little fish, neutral for the shark. And then you have parasitism, which parasite is something, it's a word that you know by now. You might think of tapeworms, you might think of any sort of like fleas or ticks or things that can infect your dog, like feed on their blood. A parasite is different from a predator, and we're going to get there in a little bit. But parasitism is another symbiotic relationship. One organism benefits, the other one is harmed. So think about this example that we have here. We have a mosquito and a human arm. So the mosquito, what is it doing? Well, it's feeding. It's getting blood from this human. It's obviously not big enough to drink all of the blood in the human and drain them or kill them. It could cause infection. It could, be a vector for, or something that delivers diseases. But this mosquito itself is not going to kill and eat this human. So it's not a predator. But it is drawing energy from another living thing. And while it's doing that, it's hurting it. There's no positive outcome of being bitten by a mosquito. There are only negative outcomes. So that makes the mosquito a parasite because it is benefiting, but it's harming the other organism. So you have a parasite in this mosquito and you have a host in the human. Think of host kind of in the same way as you think of a host for a virus. A host is pretty much never a good thing in biology. So just to move on, let's look at parasitism specifically. So these are heartworms. This is why you need to give your dog's heartworm medication, because these little worms get into all of the ventricles and the atriums and all of the chambers of the heart. And it's very, very painful and causes much discomfort and usually eventually causes the death of the animal. So in parasitism, these heartworms benefit. They're the parasite. And the dog, or the heart of the dog, is the host. So a parasite feeds on a host. Parasite harms a host. It's different from a predator because the goal of a parasite is not to kill and devour its host. It's just to feed off of it, to leech nutrients, to leach energy, food from this organism. So when it does that, it removes energy, it removes nutrients, it removes and damages the health of that organism that is the host. But it's not going to kill it and devour it and eat all of it. That's why it's different from a predator. The goal of a parasite is not to kill its host, because usually if the host dies, so does the parasite. It's not, let me feed off of this and move on. Usually this is a lifelong kind of connection. There are some exceptions. Things like fleas can move from host to host. But again, fleas aren't going to try and kill the dog. And they typically won't. Lydia, no ma'am, stop. Examples of these fleas, leeches, worms, not like earthworms, but heartworms, ringworms, intestinal worms, any worms that can get inside the intestines and feed off of the nutrients that are in an organism's intestines or stomach. Those are going to be parasites. Commensalism. So again, this is a relationship where one organism is helped and the other one doesn't make a difference. In this example, you have a whale and there's barnacles growing on it. So the barnacles don't hurt the whale. They don't cause it any pain. They don't cause it any damage, any suffering. Nothing negative happens to this whale because barnacles are growing on it. But the barnacles benefit because they have a place to live. They don't have to latch on to some surface under the ocean. They're latching on to this whale. And as that whale is swimming, the barnacles feed. The barnacles get their nutrients, not from the whale, but from the water that the whale moves through. So the whale is not harmed, it's not hurt, it's not damaged, but these barnacles are benefiting. So this is a commensalism relationship. There's different ways you can try and remember that. I always remember like a common situation is not necessarily beneficial for everyone, but my way of remembering things doesn't always work for you. So if you have a way to remember these, by all means, share them with me, share them with your classmates. It may help them a little bit. And then we have mutualism. So this is a very interesting photograph, but I enjoy them very much. So mutualism, both organisms benefit. Both organisms are better off because of their interactions with each other. So you can think of this example here, the desert giant, the relationship between the saguaro and the long-nosed bat is an example of mutualism. The saguaro cactus is pollinated exclusively by the long-nosed bat, and the long-nosed bat only eats from saguaro cactus. They're completely dependent on each other. If you remove the saguaro cactus, that long-nosed bat would die. If you remove the long-nosed bat, the saguaro cactus would not pollinate. Now, the saguaro cactus lived for a long time, so it would take longer for you to see the effects of the loss of the long-nosed bat, the loss of the pollinator, but eventually the saguaro cactus would die off because they're not pollinated by anything other than that long-nosed bat. So that is an extremely close relationship. Mutualism sometimes is minorly beneficial to both organisms. Sometimes it's the entire livelihood of both organisms that depend on that relationship. But either way, that symbiotic relationship is those organisms living in a close relationship with each other. Another example here, you have this alligator and you have this bird. Well, alligators have a lot of teeth. That's obvious here. And organisms' teeth are extremely important to them, especially if they're predators. But they don't have a toothbrush. They can't brush their teeth the way that you and I can brush our teeth and make sure that our gums and our teeth are healthy. But alligators still need to maintain the health of their teeth and gums. So you have these little birds that hop in and they will collect the dead meat, the scraps that are left over in the mouths of these alligators. I know it sounds crazy, but the rotting meat that just accumulates in the spaces between these teeth can cause those teeth to decay. Just like when you don't brush your teeth and you don't get all of the gunk and all of the stuff out from between your teeth, it can get there, stuck in between, and it will rot and it will cause your teeth to rot. Well, alligators experience the same thing. So these birds come in, they pick their mouths clean. bird gets to eat, the alligator gets clean teeth. And it's a crazy arrangement because what's stopping this little alligator from snapping clothes? Well, look at the size of that bird. It's probably not worth its time to eat that. But this bird can get some food. This alligator can get its teeth cleaned. And you, at least when you're sitting in a classroom, are also participating in a form of mutualism. You benefit because your minds are being enriched, and I benefit because I'm getting paid for enriching your minds. This image or this video, I would like for you to take a look at. It's just a fun watch. It's kind of long. Battle at Kruger, you're gonna see a whole bunch of wild stuff. There's buffalo, there's lions, there's crocodiles, there's just so much that happens here. So I want you to take a look at this video, kind of watch it in your own time. Tomorrow I'll come on with some notes about some of the relationships that are happening here. Predation, there's like predator-prey relationships, there's competition, there's so much happening in this clip, and it's kind of long, but it's very surprising and it's very fun. So take a look at that, and tomorrow I'll come on and hopefully I will have more good stuff for you.